Alright, welcome to episode 60 of What If Civilization Started Over. In the last episode then we had a lot of colonization. I also, decided I'm probably going to record like this from now on, just because it's more reliable. I'm also going to pause it so I can draw lines and then you don't have to see me waste a lot of time drawing those lines. So yeah, we saw colonization up in North America, which looks pretty good. We saw two new colonial powers in South America, being both of the Spanish countries, apart from Catalonia. We also saw more colonization in Russia, with three pretty huge Russian countries, like the Uralian one, the red one, and this new, well, not new, but newly more important gold country up here. China also went to war with the Guangxi country, and Guangxi is now collapsed into this new red team country over here, and we saw an enlargement of their alliance, which is the Circle Alliance. So these three countries, as you know, the red family sort of country, joined that alliance. We also saw the cool Indo-Chinese country, who I really like. They got more stuff, so that's good. And we have this blue country here as well. They're just hanging out, and Tibet is also here. So I don't know, chill stuff with that. Donbass is also gone. I think that was the last episode, maybe not. No, it probably wasn't. Yeah, and we also saw the reunification of that country and the division of the Rhineland. So loads of stuff in the last episode. And today we're going to be starting off this episode with the Catalonia Conference, which I think I initially called the Barcelona Conference, but now it's just the Catalonia one. So that's fun. But it's, in the last episode, expanded to other European countries, such as Norway, Britain, the Netherlands, Italy, France. Well, Italy wasn't as important because they don't really care as much, because they don't trade as globally. They're more of a Mediterranean trade country, because they're not as strong as their other allies. The Turks also joined towards the end, because of threats from southern India and Oman, who stopped them from getting out of either of these seas, and also just defeated this country, which is very mean. So yeah, the Turkish also joined, which is pretty scary. And we're going to see another country join, which is going to be the German country over here, just because they have interests in being able to trade with Asia, like all these other major European countries. If we look at power rankings, which I don't think they've changed at all, because that's just how power rankings are at this point, the Germans are the 5th most powerful country in the world. So yeah, they're kind of important to all this stuff. Also a very big colony up here in North America. You can just look at the power rankings here, with some really big and major cities over here along the sort of New England, like Ontario areas of North America. So it's pretty cool. Here's the city map in North America, if you were interested. I don't think I put any in either of those colonies, but there probably should be some in those areas. But yeah, things are getting worse between the Southern Indians and the Europeans, because now Southern India has started a campaign of naval warfare between the European ships and their ships, as they sent out their navy to just go and attack European merchant vessels. So the Europeans learned of this, and then they escalated the conflict even further by sending their own navies to go defend merchant vessels. And they've had multiple skirmishes within the Indian Ocean, and things have got so bad that the Catalonia Conference looks like it's going to come to an end, as the nations of Europe come together in one sort of major naval idea, which is going to culminate right around here in the Bay of Naples. Just the general Mediterranean. Most of these Mediterranean countries are part of this. The Ukrainians and the Hungarians don't attend the conference. They sent observers, but they're not really as interested, because they're more interested in expansion into Europe rather than worrying about trade with Asia. But what we see happening is one huge European army get together, or navy, to try and stop the threat that Southern India has towards the nations of Europe. So that's it. Today's episode is European colonialists versus colonists versus Southern India. So we're going to see this war start off with all the guys who are interested in this declaring war on the Southern Indian Alliance. These two guys also, of course, want to reclaim the city. That's what kind of started this, and it just escalated from there, if you hadn't watched the previous ones. Anyway, the countries which declare war are Norway, the Netherlands, the British, the French, the Germans, both of the Spanish countries, and Turkey. So noticeably, there's no Italy, no Catalonia, no Ukraine, no Poland, and no Hungary. So there you go. There's that. And now let's get to the also no Ireland. Meh, if you were interested, no Ireland or Carthage. Anyway, those countries that could be included. Let's see how it goes, because we're going to see the first bit of fighting here with it. Oh, damn it, Turkey. with the Turks, because Turkey is going to be trying to invade this southern Indian colony. So they're going to move their navy into this area. The Omani country will move its own navy into this. I don't know what this area is called. Strait of Hormuz. That's over here. Persian Gulf. And the Turks, they come very close to a naval confrontation with the Omani country. Before they're like, are you just going to let us do this, please? Because we're going to invade you. We will invade you. And we have ambitions on your territory. So it's probably a good idea for you to not get invaded, because we're fighting alongside a load of other European troops, and they could definitely roll over you. This is also a highly valuable area over here, especially with the Turks recently opening up the Suez Canal, along with some other Europeans, but mostly it was a Turkish effort. Sorry. So yeah, this area has become very valuable, and yeah, they don't intervene. So the Turkish start a military invasion, sending a whole load of their army, and by that I mean a lot of it, into this territory, and the southern Indians just don't see it valuable enough to send in necessary protections, and they will take over the entire colony. Then we can come around to this area, where we see the European troops sending their militaries down to Africa. Are they going to attack Africa? No, they're kind of just going to give them guns. And we see some brutal naval conflicts happen around the Seychelles, and also just through this general area of the Indian Ocean, because the Southern Indians want to defend their colonies. However, both of these colonies are realizing that they could actually be independent countries, so we start to see rebellious, where's my culture there? Culture. Rebellious groups rise up in both of these territories, in Tanzania and also here in Madagascar, because, the Europeans have inspired Africa towards independence. What? That makes zero sense. Anyway, so the main area, Madagascar, is up here in the north. We also have some bits in the interior, which is mostly where the Europeans have got to, not interior west. These territories not really, whilst in Tanzania there's a lot of movement around the Great Lakes. Not Great Lakes. That's in America. I mean around Lake Victoria, there we go. And also in some of the rural areas connecting up various cities, but the cities are the main hub points. The East Coast is less pro this, although there are some groups from Ethiopia that start to move in, and Tanzanian forces and rebels start to move in towards central areas also. The mountains become major bases, and we see this lakish area also fall over, because the main people who are profiting from their colonization by the Indians are the coastal people, so they manage to survive out in these areas, whilst down here in Madagascar they also start to get pushed back by a combined Malagasy European force. Unfortunately for these guys, they do see an invasion by the Southern Indians as they move off their base in the Comoros Islands, which hasn't been taken yet, and start to move across the rest of Madagascar. From here we can see fighting occur here in the Indian Ocean as European forces try to occupy some of the Maldives Islands. I think this is the Chagos Archipelago over here, because they see a good idea in attacking all of this, Indonesian territory, because they kind of have colonial claims on that, which is a bit of a bad thing to have. However, no one's going to stop them, so they try to gain naval superiority over the southern Indian Ocean, and they're going to achieve that. So from here we see a united European army, just like what we saw with the invasion of the Spanish colonies, and they're going to move in towards a major part of this colony, which is of course down here in Java. So make a landing on the island of Java, which with a brush that is way too big for what they're doing, because this is going to be a very tricky invasion. They will take the city, which is equivalent to Jakarta, and the landing goes pretty successfully, taking over this strait right here, probably called like the Strait of Jakarta or something like that. The Southern Indians start to send forces down here into Sumatra and also Malaysia, and also around into Borneo a bit. However, they aren't really that prepared. This is going to put up their base over here for the Indian Ocean in Java as they start to move their navy in towards threatening the coast of this country. It is worth noting, however, that Southern Indians have their own alliance between the green, orange, Indo-Chinese countries and also themselves. So all of those three other countries are fighting alongside the Southern Indians, which is pretty important. How the Europeans are trying to get them to go away. Really, they're trying to threaten this territory as they move up into Sumatra and actually beat back some of the Southern Indian armies and take over this island over here. It starts to really scare some of the Southern Indian allies. They also move towards the Australian colony. This is more of a German thing. There's interest in Australia, and they set up a small military excursion around here. So they just make a landing near this part of the Southern Indian colony, and then start their own invasion into this major city over here and this other one on the northern coast, which effectively just gives them control over this entire western area of the Australian colony. The Southern Indians will ask for support to defend Asia from colonialism. However, there's not that many countries who are really all that interested. Central Asia is just a huge mess. The Russian area is basically European. Turkey is actively fighting against you. China is a huge mess. Orange China is just very unresponsive at the moment. They're also a colonial power in Asia, so meh. Japan's a huge mess. Korea is very isolationist, and they also have pretty good relations with the Europeans. They do a lot of trade with Europe, and they're kind of good with that. This country would be not that much help. Baikal is miles and miles away. This guy, meh. Maybe they would care, but really not that much, because they're very culturally different to you guys. So yeah, they can't really get any new allies, and they're starting to lose ground over here in Asia. Because to see finally troops leave Madagascar because they just don't really care enough. And instead, what these Southern Indian troops are going to do is move over here to Tanzania into an area which they do care about a lot more, because Tanzania is a lot more valuable, and they start to absolutely steamroll these southern areas of Tanzania, where all the European troops have now left and gone off to fight in Australia or Indonesia, as they start to move back the Tanzanian rebellion towards the central Lake Victoria area. That's pretty bad. The Ethiopians have also prospered a lot from trade with southern India, who's their main trading partner for a very long time, and currently during this war still is. However, they were afraid for a long time, well, rightly so, that they would get colonized or split between potentially Oman and also southern India. And Oman's an interesting country, because theoretically it could have joined the southern Indians, but it never did. So that's good. However, a new deal has been brokered between the Europeans and the Indian country right here, as they lease support to the European military, which is going to be this one right here. And the Europeans are allowed to use this port as a base to attack southern Indian areas. So they start to, barrage southern Indian cities. They also start to attack vessels to get out and try and trade. And a major European attack is going to be made on these parts of, whatever this coast is called. I don't remember. The British had a colony on this coast, but I forgot what it was called. They also want to get the Andaman Islands for the naval importance there, and a landing is made here in southern Borneo, which is potentially going to spark some scary thoughts for various countries, as the Indo-Chinese country is going to decide to pull out of the war and leave the Southern Indian Alliance. They realize that it could be really bad for them, and the Europeans are like, yeah, we would definitely colonize your stuff. Various countries in the Alliance do have claims on your territory, because you got some really nice territory, like this stuff, really. And there's also lots of resources in the Indonesian jungle, Indo-Chinese jungle. So this country is going to leave the war, and that is going to spark outrage within the southern Indian country, as they stop trading with the Indonesians. But the Indonesians, in an effort to become better related to the Europeans, will allow the Europeans to just kind of pull off a maneuver a bit like this, because the Indo-Chinese have been defending this sort of Gulf of Thailand area, and they're going to allow them to make this major offensive down here. The Southern Indians do have their victories, as they managed to push the Europeans, largely from Sumatra, but not entirely. However, they are losing ground over here in the western part of their colony, because the Europeans have attained naval superiority to a large degree in this territory. So that is bad, as the entirety of the Australian colony is lost to the Europeans, and they start to move towards areas such as Sulawesi, the Moluccas, and also Papua New Guinea, when something else bad happens. And that, that is the joining of China into the war against this country. I did literally just mention, how long is this video? 30 minutes, that's alright. I just mentioned how China is a colonial power here in Asia, and I wasn't joking. As the Chinese, one of the strongest countries in the world, the fourth most powerful country in the world, starts their invasion into the southern Indian Papua New Guinea colony, moving into these territories and taking them pretty quickly because they're very poorly defended. They're also pretty helpful in attacking the Moluccas, and the Europeans agreed to work alongside them. Another great reason for you leaving the war, and it's also kind of them leaving the war spurred China onto joining the war, because they didn't want to have to fight an actual front on-ground war against the Indo-Chinese. So with them leaving, they didn't have to, which is very fortunate. Anyway, another major offensive is made into this area as people start to retreat from Borneo, and yeah, they're just kind of all trapped as they move into Sumatra, and they do manage to push these guys out to Sumatra, which is nice, and from these islands but basically the entire island of Borneo is lost to a combination of European and Chinese forces. China is also a very populated country, as they are in real life, and also just they have a lot of land, and really valuable land. So they take over the rest of this territory. I don't know why that happened. But yeah, and the jungles are effectively taken over by European forces. The Chinese make a landing here in the north, taking over the northern part of Sulawesi, and at this point, all but the native people of this territory, or not native, but the people who moved here, all the military is gone, and they're just being left to defending Sumatra and also the Malay colony, which has been entirely pushed back as they forced out these Singaporean islands. And yeah, it's getting pretty bad at this point. These guys, both of them do have their militaries fighting, so that's helpful. But if we move down here to Tanzania, we can see there's been a huge withdrawal of forces from the Tanzanian front, as most of Tanzania has been liberated by the Tanzanian forces, and it looks like now they could be entirely pushed out, except this area in the south, where the Europeans will finally arrive and finally push these guys from the territory. So, what is going on there? Thank you. The Malagasy people also managed to take over the islands of Mayotte and Reunion, or whatever is over here. Not Mauritius, of course. And the Seychelles, of course, also taken over by these guys. Well, actually, probably not. To be honest, I don't know if they bother. The Europeans maybe occupy them, but they don't really care about them that much. Maybe Tanzania takes them over. Sure, you can have it, Tanzania. The Maldives and the Chagos archipelago are not taken over either. However, the Europeans now start a plan to launch a naval offensive into actual southern Indian territory. And it's going to be a hugely risky offensive, but they are going to land it here in southern India, gaining naval dominance over these islands and crushing the European or the southern Indian colonial forces, or military naval forces in those areas. And yeah, they start to move up into this territory. The strategic point in landing here is 0. It's just that this is the area where the Spanish religion is and the Spanish city was. Well, still is, just not Spanish anymore. So both the Spanish countries want to colonize this area, however the blue team has more of a claim to it, and they start to move into this territory. And you might be wondering why they're doing so well in this offensive. Well, it's because both of the allies over here both of the southern Indian allies have just exited the war, and that's pretty bad. So this country over here, and the green country and also the orange country have left the war. They were threatened by Europeans, saying that we're going to move entirely through southern India and occupy the entire hugely populated country, probably the most populated nation on earth, and invade you guys. And for some reason, these guys were dumb enough to believe that was a possible idea, and they just left the war. They're also losing a load of people on these fronts and fighting in territories they're not familiar with. So, yeah, I say it's kind of justified. But it's going to give the Europeans a huge load of power in this war as they start to absolutely obliterate southern Indian defenses in this territory and move towards various cities in all across this land. But another major thing we see occur is the rebellion of another orange country, being the Sri Lankan country, which isn't the shade of orange, but close enough. So they start to move into these southern areas of the southern Indian country, and also along the eastern coast areas which they used to own, as these Sri Lankan rebels start to do really, really good work for the European forces, who they don't exactly agree with, because the Europeans kind of want to colonize Indonesia now, but they want their independence again, so they're going to try and take it. The Europeans will also take over the Andaman Islands, although it looks like somebody might be getting those back. Actually, no, it'll probably be Indonesia, not Bengal. They're probably going to give them to Indochina, to be honest, because Indochina didn't attack them, and that's well nice. All southern Indian troops in Malaysia and Sumatra are now recalled back home, and I mean, this war, it sounds like it's being pretty quick. It is definitely not being this quick. This war is lasting potentially longer than the 7 Years' War. It's more of like an on and off thing, just these naval invasions into southern Indian territory, and as they approach the cities around the major areas of southern India, the country is going to submit and sign for peace. So I'm going to draw a peace treaty, and I'll see you again in a bit. And we're back. So here are the new borders I've created. As you can see, in the west, the Turkish have taken over this part of the United Arab Emirates, which also blends a bit over into the modern day UAE. Down in the south, we can see the Tanzania and Malagasy countries have both received their independence, whilst these islands, the Seychelles, have been taken over to Tanzania. I think the Comoros should actually go to Madagascar, so I'm going to give them to that. over to India, then we can see that India's been split into two separate areas. Well, three, because we have the independence of this country again. We can also go to layer 14 and just work out where the capital city is, because I forgot they need one of those. Because yeah, I had the previous old borders in, and then what happened to these poor guys is the territory is split, kind of, with the northern part of the territory, northeastern area, going over to the purple Spanish country, because the Spanish country, the purple one, wasn't able to get the western territory, which went to the blue country because they had more of a claim to the city, with the city being controlled from their previous capital city, or the Spanish capital. So they were allowed to take this eastern territory instead, which they're kind of content with. It's okay. But also it was the Sri Lankan sort of territory. As you can see, the Sri Lankans extended all the way up to this area, which these guys have now taken over. So there's that. And southern India is still like a relatively strong country at the moment. Indochina has taken over the Andaman Islands. These guys just out of the alliance. Britain's taken over Malaysia. Sumatra's gone to Turkey. Norway's taken over Java. This is the Dutch, and the Chinese also expanded their colony. The French are over here. The Germans are in Australia, and Papua New Guinea is now entirely under the control of the really, really, really scary Chinese Empire. So, yeah, everything's good in the world. And yeah, I guess we'll see how this affects the series going on forward into the next episodes. But yeah, thanks for watching, and I hope to see you again next time. Have a nice rest of your day. Goodbye.